Hey y'all, happy Sunday. Hope everything is going well for you and yours. This is the portion of the show where we let YouTube send out the notifications via social media, let folks know that the broadcast is getting ready to start. We'll sit here and we'll count down the next 2 minutes before I push that button and go live. If you happen to be watching this on replay, go ahead and scrub past this graphic until you see my smiling face. If you have any questions and you're joining us today in the live chat, feel free to go ahead and add those questions to the live chat now, and we'll get to them in due course during this live Q&A session. So, sit back, relax, grab a beverage, and we'll get going in about 30 seconds. Hey y'all, happy Sunday to you. Hope everything is going your way. Hope everybody's well. It's been a crazy week here at Chaos Central. A lot of things going on, a lot of things not going on. If you were with us last week, I said there would not be a live stream this week because I was scheduled to have some serious dental work done on Wednesday, I think it was. Yes, Wednesday. And that did not happen. It was a mix-up with medications. The medications that I was supposed to get did not come in. So we had to reschedule everything for early December. So it's all kind of a holding pattern here. I'm fine. There's nothing actually, I'm not in pain or anything like that. It's just, some things that have to be done that can't be done now. So, I'm in a holding pattern once again. Let's see, I have a little bit more house cleaning to do here in that Michael Mazalik, who normally premieres a video about an hour after we're finished here live. He's put his channel on hiatus for the holidays. A lot of us do that simply because we have so many Christmas presents and other holiday projects we need to get done. He will not be premiering today or for all of next month. From what I gather, he hasn't come right out and said so, but in his Facebook post, he said something about see you in January. So I'm going to assume that he'll be back in January. So hope you have a good one there, Michael, and you get a well-deserved rest. So if you are not familiar with Michael's work, I did not do it, but I will put a link to his channel down in the description of this one. If you use Vectric Aspire and are getting into 3D carving, oh boy, his is an important channel to check out. The man is truly an artist when it comes to 3D modeling in Aspire. And I highly, highly encourage you to subscribe to his channel, go back, start from the beginning, and check out his work. He's very, very good, and he's forgotten more about Aspire than I have ever learned. So Along those lines, meaning 3D carving, etc., in today's live Q&A, during these holiday Q&As, because I don't have a standard video to take questions on, I thought what I would do is I would bring up some smaller topics that don't really warrant their own video, but it is something that needs to be talked about. So this week, I decided I would go back into the modeling resolution in job setup. And this is in VCarve Desktop and Pro and Aspire. And that is the modeling resolution, because I think I have caused some confusion. In fact, I know I've caused some confusion because I've received emails on it. It is something early on I didn't know about, and it's something that is easy to forget if you're not careful and if you don't do a lot of 3D carving. And let me go ahead and screen share. And I'm going to spend quite a bit of time screen sharing here, so I'll miss some of the questions and comments, but I will come back and check. So let me go ahead and screen share and then bring up Aspire. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about over here in job setup, down here, past all of the this other information, we're talking about modeling resolution right here. The default when you first start up the program is going to be standard. If you open a file, it will remember the last modeling resolution you used in that file. Now, where some of the confusion starts is what this modeling resolution affects. It does not affect the resolution of the 3D view, be that in the preview here when you're just establishing your model, or the preview over in the toolpath tab when you have previewed a 3D finishing toolpath. It has, or any other toolpath. It has nothing to do with this display out here. What it has to do with is the resolution of the surface of your material and any 3D components you put on or in the surface of that material. What I mean by that is, if we look here under modeling resolution, I have it set to standard, which is the fastest. And I'll get into that in just a second. And if you look down here in gray, you might not even be able to see it, but it says 1 million points. What this means is the program basically covers the surface of your material with 1 million points that at the beginning all have a height of 0. They're all sitting flush with the surface. When you add a 3D component to your project, it adjusts those points to display the elevations in that relief of that 3D component. And it uses 1 million points on the standard resolution. If we click on this menu here, we get into high, which is 3 times slower. And again, more on that in a second. Very high, which is 7 times slower. Now, something that is said, but I don't think is said often enough. And in fact, I caused some confusion by not paying attention to this. And that is the material size. Now, It very much depends on the size of the model that you're using, but it also depends on the size of your material. Now, for instance, I have here on this particular project a piece that is 4 inches wide in X, 4 inches high in Y, and 3/4 of an inch thick. We'll go ahead and switch this over to millimeters for the folks who use the metric, 101.6 millimeters by 101.6 millimeters by 19. That way you get an idea of the size that I'm talking about. So this is not a huge piece of material here. Switch back over to metric, or excuse me, imperial. So basically what's going on is it has covered the surface of this material with 1 million points. So on a smaller model like this, a smaller project like this, 1 million points may be enough depending upon your model and how close you're going to be observing this model from. If this is something that's meant to go high up on a wall, this is probably enough. You don't need a lot of serious detail. But if it's something that you're going to hold in your hand, you do need a lot of serious detail. Now, what is meant by fastest, slower, and slower yet is the amount of time it's going to take the program to calculate that modeling resolution when it comes to tool pathing. Depending upon how many points it has to calculate, like let's go up to very high. Here we're dealing with 4 million points. So it scattered 4 million points across the surface of this material. So that's a lot more resolution that will pick up a lot more detail, but it's going to take the program, according to this, 7 times longer to calculate those tool paths. So it's a trade-off. You can get finer, tighter resolution by going with very high, but at the expense of the amount of time it's going to take to calculate the tool path, then preview that tool path, which, depending upon the project and depending upon the size of the project, could also lead to longer machining times because there are more calculations required to move that bit. Now, the confusion that I caused is I did a video and I don't even remember what the topic of it was. And I used a very small model out here in one corner of a large piece of material. What I failed to remember when I did that was it's going to scatter these 4 million points over the entire piece of material. Now, on a project of this size, that's not really that critical. But if you have just for the sake of discussion, if you have an 8-foot by 4-foot sheet of plywood or high density foam, and you're cutting a model that's only 4 inches square, it's going to spread out those 4 million points over the entire sheet of material, not over the size of that model. So you are going to lose resolution and possibly lose detail by spreading those 4 million points over that entire sheet of foam or plywood or whatever it is you're carving. So in this case, what I would do is I would set up the job like I have here with my XY datum position set to the center, select my modeling resolution for that piece of material, which is actually a lie to the software. Then select my model, preview it, calculate the tool path, preview it, make sure that that is set up right. Then when I get out on my machine, set my XY0 to the center of where I want that model to carve. So that's going to give me the highest resolution for that model. In other words, we're not spreading these 4 million points over an entire sheet of material that we only want to carve in a 4-inch by 4-inch square. Hopefully that makes some sense. Let me jump over here to your comments and see, have I lost anybody here? Then we'll go back to the screen share. See, go back here. Everybody is talking about, okay, I'm not going to say your name, but interesting choice. Can't remember how you get the option for ultra high resolution. I'll go into that in just a minute. That's going to be another one of another subtopic of this, but I will get into that in just a second, because there are two more not screen resolutions, excuse me. There are two more modeling resolutions that you can use. Okay, so let me go back to sharing my screen here and get back into Aspire. We'll hide that. Now, this would be for a small model on a small piece of material. But what if you are doing a large panel? You have an 8-foot by 4-foot sheet of high density urethane, and you want to carve that entire sheet. Well, you would set up, see, that would be 48 inches wide by 96 inches high, and we'll use the same thickness. That's going to take that same 4 million points and apply it to the entire surface of this sheet. And if this is going to be seen close up, that may not be enough resolution for you to get the detail you want on this type of a larger project. Well, knowing this, Vectric has helped us out by giving us two more options for cases like this. And the way you get into those further options is come out of job setup, hold down shift, then go back into job setup. And then once you're in the job setup window, you can let go of the shift key. Then we come down here to very high, to modeling resolution. I'll click on this drop-down menu, and we now have two more resolutions here, extremely high and maximum. But pay very close attention to this. 20 times slower to calculate and preview, and then 50 times slower to calculate and preview. That is very, very relevant. And I'll tell you why. For instance, I did this earlier today. I did this little angel on my desktop computer in the house. And I have two photos up here. One of them was done with the high resolution, 7 times slower. And the other one was done at max resolution, 50 times slower. And I named these photos Photo 1 and Photo 2 to kind of illustrate that you cannot tell a difference between them. They are so similar in the quality of the carve that you can't tell by looking at it which was done at max resolution and which was done at the very high resolution. But what it did do was the tool path that was calculated at very high, 7 times slower resolution, took about 58 seconds to calculate the tool path. The one that was done with max resolution took a little over 7 minutes. And that's indoors on my desktop, my gaming PC, which is running 16 gigs of RAM and a Intel i7 processor. I mean, we're not talking about a weak machine. The difference is so much, I would not attempt to calculate this tool path on this laptop while I'm doing this live Q&A because it would use up so much resources. I can't guarantee it wouldn't kick me offline and end this broadcast. But my point is that on a small model such as this, and this was done on that 4x4 material with, or 100 millimeter by 100 millimeter, with the two different resolutions, I don't think anybody out there in the chat can tell me which is which. Can you tell me which one is max resolution and which one is very high? So what I'm getting at is I have seen questions, well, why not just set it to max and leave that as a default? Sure, you can do that if you want to, but it's overkill for most things. It's just not needed. In a case where you are doing something like a 4-foot by 8-foot, max resolution might be what you need to do to be able to get that level of detail on, say, a mural, horses galloping across the entire width of the piece, or texture lines, or, doing a depth map of, I don't know, the lunar surface or the surface of Mars or something like that. Then you would need to go with this resolution because it's putting 16 million points over an area that is 48 by 96, or what do we have here? 1219 by 2438 millimeters. So you would need those extra points over something this big, but over something as small as 4 inches by 4 inches, you are only taxing your system to have 16 million points density on this small of a project. So using these two resolutions, I have never had a case where I have needed those resolutions. And my biggest 3D carve so far has been about 16 inches by 16 inches. I have never needed either of these resolutions. So generally speaking, going with a very high resolution is more than enough. But the thing to remember about this modeling resolution is to try to use the smallest material size possible. If you're not cutting the entire piece of material, there is no sense in really sizing your material out here for that piece of material if all you're doing is carving the 3D component. Now, obviously, if you're carving a 3D component here in the center, but you're putting text outside, then you have to put in your material. My standard material size on something like this is 16 by 10.75. That uses a standard 1 by 12. Well, actually, a 1 by 12 would be 11 and a quarter, but I always leave a margin on the top and bottom. And that is, generally speaking, a good enough resolution for something of that size. And I can have text up here, text down below, or even more artwork off to the sides. If you're going something much, much larger than this, say something 4 feet wide, 1200 millimeters wide, then you might want to think about getting into those higher resolutions. But for something less than about 24 inches by 24 inches, they are really not necessary. But it's a balancing act. That's what I'm basically trying to say is you want to have good resolution for your model, but not at the expense of not at the expense of the amount of time it's going to take for you to and resources it's going to take for you to calculate and then preview that toolpath. A lot of it is just flat out overkill. Let's see, Brooks Martin here. Doesn't matter if you're building a 3D model versus importing clip art. No, it does not matter. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you're importing an STL file or an OBJ file from another program, or if you're using the clip art that came with it, or if you that came with the program, or if you're creating your own components. It doesn't matter. Let's see. Jim Bashirs. So just give up isn't an option. Just give up is always an option. I don't know if you remember Mythbusters. I'm sure you do, Jim. Failure is always an option. So, IL Peleg wants to know, I wonder why do they hide this behind the shift key? It's not so much hiding it as it is kind of one of those out of sight, out of mind things. It's not necessary for probably 99% of the projects you'll ever do. So they made you have to kind of work for it to make sure that you really, really want to do that. So, yes, we'll get into preview simulation quality. Rick French, does this resolution affect the quality of the actual carve or just the preview calculation? It does affect the resolution, the quality of the actual carve. And that's mainly because, again, when you bring in clip art or import a STL file or something like that, it is basically the way the program works is it's a height map. If you've ever seen a height map image, you're talking about shades of gray, from white to black. And when it's kind of like photo editing, in that the higher the resolution of a photo, the better the detail is going to be. This is very similar, but you're talking about in a 3D sense. So if that height map is scattered over 1 million points, the resolution is not going to be as fine as if it's scattered over 4 million points. You are able to detect smaller differences in elevation the more points you have. Now, again, there comes a point of overkill where it's not really necessary to know that the difference in elevation at point A and point B, it's not really that important to know that it's not that important that there be 6 different steps to get from point A to point B. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but it does affect the quality of the actual carve, in that with fewer points, the resolution of the model is lower. You can miss detail. So this is not just a preview thing. This is also a quality of the carve thing. But again, if we go for that max resolution on something that's, small, let's say I don't have anything here. Well, my mouse. If I'm using 16 million points to carve a copy of my mouse, I don't own a bit small enough to cut that fine a resolution. My smallest bit has a tip diameter of 1/4 of a millimeter. Now that's pretty tiny, but that's still not tiny enough to cut 16 million points on something that small. If you use too low of a resolution, you'll get a carve that misses a lot of detail. It's kind of like, imagine a photo that's out of focus. So there is a balancing act to play with, and that's one of the things the preview will reflect. So it's not just the preview, it is the quality of the actual carve. So you kind of have to, you know, that's a balancing act. Let's see. Let's go here. And okay, Michael, yes, very high will be the best for most people. I find that probably, I have not yet found a need for those extreme levels of resolution. Okay, IL Peleg wants to know, is the number of points fixed per resolution regardless of the actual size of the material, i.e., is very high always the same number of points? Yes, they are fixed per resolution. But if you look at the order of magnitude here that we're talking about, and that's a good point. Let me go back over here to Aspire, and we'll get back into that. If we look, standard, which is the lowest resolution, but also the fastest calculating times, has 1 million points. Maximum has 16 million points. So the number of points doubles with each step. We've gone from standard to high, which is 2 million points. Then from high to very high is 4 million points. Extremely high is 8 million points. And then maximum is 16 million points. So every step we took, we doubled the number of points. But look at the order of magnitude on how much slower that calculation is going to be. Now, as I said, on very high, that cherub took about 58 seconds to calculate the toolpath. But on maximum, it was over 7 minutes. And that's with a very fast computer. Like I said, I wouldn't even attempt it on this laptop, especially during a live Q&A. So we went 50 times slower than the standard to get that max resolution. I mean, but yes, to answer your question, IL, 50 times, maximum is always going to be 16 million points, regardless of the size of the material you have out here. And that is the case with all of them. Very high will always be 4 million points, no matter the size of the material or how big the model is itself. So let's see here. Let's go down here. How do you type a degree symbol T button? Press and hold the Alt key, then type 0176, then let go of the Alt key. Boy, I just showed how old I am. Jiminy Christmas. Let's see. A better UI would be to have an option within the drop-down to say show more resolutions, at least in the sense of feature discovery. Well, if you read the manual and you look into job setup, it talks about it there. And I don't mean read the manual, but if you've seen any of the tutorial videos from Vectric, they do talk about it. It's just not something that's used very often, so it's not something that's very well known. So they're not trying to hide it from you as much as they're making you look for it. This is something that you really have to make the conscious decision to do. So they make you work for it. Let's see. Ayal Peleg says 4 million points on a rectangle mean 2,000 by 2,000. So if you use 20 by 20 material, you will have a point every 20 thou. Also, bit side might not matter for the example you're carving a dome. Exactly. And that's the other thing I was going to get into, and that is bit selection. In fact, I think I mentioned it kind of as an aside. Your smallest bit may not be small enough to get down into those pixel sizes. And also, it depends on what you're carving. Again, those little cherubs, they weren't super highly detailed, which is why it was almost impossible to tell the difference between the two. And yes, I know they would need to be a bit larger to be able to see a true difference between them. But I think the point is well made that you needed to see it larger, which means you can't tell just by looking at it. You have to get in closer to be able to see. It kind of proves my point. You need magnification. You can't tell with your eyes. And for those of you keeping score, picture number 1 was max resolution. Picture number 2 was very high resolution. So, and the difference in machining time was about 4 minutes when I looked at the difference. I wish I would have taken a screenshot of that, but I didn't. But yes, your point's well taken, Ayal. You can kind of figure that out in your head and decide if you're using 20 by 20 material with 4 million points. That kind of gives you a rough estimate on where that point is going to be. But as Michael Mazalik said, in 13 years of using the software, he has used max once. So that's why it's not really talked about much, because it's not really necessary. It's overkill. It's like buying a 10-yard dump truck because you're going to haul 3 sheets of plywood. It's just not necessary. So, okay, let's see. T-Button, you get used to it. You get used to it real fast. As far as holding down Alt and typing in 0176. For instance, you want to put the symbol for the US currency, cents. That's point, hold down Alt and type in 0162. Let go of the Alt key and that cent sign will be there. But there is no key for it on the keyboard. You would have to go into your character map, double click it, or copy and paste when it's just the keyboard keystroke. So, okay. Let's see. Okay, and Michael qualified that. It was that one time he used maxed was on a 33-foot long carving. So that'll give you a little bit of context for when you would use that max resolution versus not using it. A 33-foot long carving. Holy cow. I can't even imagine that. Okay, let's see here. Ayal says, do you know if on a piece of, say, 1 inch by 10 inch, the points would be 10 times denser along the 1 inch than the 10 inch? I have no way of guessing. I really have no way of knowing. And that's a developer question, to be honest with you. That's so far under the hood that I'm not even sure a mechanic would know. I really don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. The next time I talk with anybody at Vectric, I will ask them that question. That's a very good question. Brooks Martin says, I've been using Max for all of my 3D modeling. Well, you're paying for it in the amount of time needed to calculate those tool paths. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're making large objects, then maybe you need to do that. But for most folks who aren't, and if your 3D models are 12 inches by 12 inches, or what would that be, about 305 millimeters by 305 millimeters? If your projects are that size or smaller, standard is just fine. Not standard, excuse me. Very high, 7 times slower is just fine. So, let's see. Let me get going here. Rick? Yes. Okay. Michael Mazalik says the points are spread out equally. It's not a perfect set of numbers. Okay. Brooks Martin says it would be nice if Vectric accessed the graphics processors. I agree. I do agree. I would like it if they did use the GPU. I have a dynamite video card that I bought that computer to use for video editing. And just as an aside, I can tell you that when it comes to my editing program that does use the GPU on my video card, a video that used to take about an hour and a half to render now takes 15 minutes. It's that much quicker. So, let's see. Jim Shears, does anyone ever make an address sign or other outdoor sign? What material did you use? After 50 reminders, I have to do what my wife says. Always remember, when mama's happy, everybody's happy. If mama's not happy, nobody's happy. I have made a couple of outdoor signs. One is a test that I've been running for about, it's coming up on 3 years. And one of the videos I plan on making next spring, when it's decent weather outside and I can do, is the results of that test. It's basically an outdoor finish test. If it were me, I would make it out of a high density foam and paint it with house paint, exterior grade house paint. If basically the results of my test are going to be, there is no such thing as a perfect clear coat for exterior. You will need some maintenance, and it will need to be sanded and refinished on occasion. The simple fact is that clear coat finishes expand and contract. They are subject to UV. They will yellow, they will crack, they will peel. Personally, I would, as Brooks Martin is suggesting, a high density urethane foam like AZEK or something like that. Whoops, excuse me. And then paint it with house paint. Now I have seen people use, it also depends on the look you're going for. I have seen people use cedar, and there's a lot of that around here where I'm in the Pacific Northwest, and you see a lot of rustic farm and cabin type of operations. So there are a lot of thick cedar slab signs around here. And virtually all of them finish with an oil finish, just something like a tung oil or a Danish oil or something like that. But they have to go back and maintain that finish to keep it looking nice. So it's not a set it and forget it. There will need to be some cleaning and maintenance. If you have a clear coated front door, you know what I'm talking about. There are some finishes that you can use, like Matthew Cremona, when he made his outdoor picnic table. Let's see. The finish he used was a combination of an epoxy and a urethane. And because it's not subjected to or wasn't subjected to a lot of heavy UV where it was sitting, it was partially shaded by the house and partially shaded by a couple of large trees in his backyard. It wasn't exposed to intense UV. So it has held up remarkably well. I don't remember the exact products he used, but if you're going to be putting a stained or just a naturally finished wood piece outdoors, there is no perfect clear coat. They will all yellow, crack, or peel eventually. And I have a test sign outside on our fence that will demonstrate that. So, yeah, Michael Mazalik is also recommending PVC. See, that's a problem for me because neither of those products are available here locally. I either have to drive 270 miles north to Portland to get some, or 270 miles to the south to Sacramento to get some. I'm right in the middle. There is no place within that 270-mile circle that sells either PVC or high density urethane or anything. The closest thing I can get is the Pink Panther insulation foam, and then only in small pieces at my local big box store. So, but I can't get a hold of Sign Foam or Color Core by King Plastics or any of that stuff. I don't have a plastic supplier nearby at all. So I don't have any experience cutting it. And I am not driving all the way to Portland, especially not to Portland, to do that. Just not happening. And Michael Mazalik, bite your tongue. I have told my wife that the best she can hope for is that the place burns to the ground and we start from scratch, because that's it. I'm done. We've lived in 14 cities in, I can't remember how many states that is. And I'm just done with moving. So, okay. And Tom here is asking, Tom Conway up in Alaska. Howdy, Tom. Is there settings for screen viewing resolution? Sometimes my stuff look like blocks of bricks. I was going to get into that, and thank you for reminding me. Let me go back to sharing here, and we will get back into Aspire. So this is the resolution that actually affects the size of the material, or actually reflects the size of the material and the model itself. Okay, I'm going to cancel that because I don't know if I changed any settings or not. The preview resolution over here and in the 3D view, that is dependent on the preview simulation quality. In that, we go up here, and I believe it's in Toolpaths, and there it is, the Toolpaths menu, preview simulation quality. Now, I have mine set to maximum in this case because I do take a lot of screen captures, and I want the maximum resolution. This setting right here affects the preview on your computer monitor only. That's all it affects. It has nothing to do with the model. And in fact, it has nothing to do with 3D at all. If you do a two-dimensional V carve out here, it has to do with the resolution of the image that's displayed on the monitor. And that's it. So again, that's up in the Toolpaths menu, preview simulation quality. And I set mine to maximum because I need it. I'm making high definition screen captures for video thumbnails, etc. You may or may not need it. But the Vectric software is, it's set up to where once you set this, it should remember it. You may have to save a file at this resolution for it to save that setting. But I believe I only set this once and it remembered it. So that's where that is. Let me close this and go back over. I've got nothing to preview. So that's where that is. So and that's it right there. There's my better half throwing in her 2 cents. So, okay. Let's go here. T Button wants to know, are the benefits to vector start points for V carving being on a corner versus along a straight or curved section? There is no standard answer to that. I'm going to use that word that nobody wants to hear, and that is, it depends. If it depends on where your XY0 origin is set, excuse me, suddenly got the hiccups. It depends on where that is set. And it depends. And what I mean by that is it's just going to be the rapid movement to get to that start point to start cutting. Once it starts cutting, let's say you're cutting a line of text. It's going to come over and start at the start point of the first letter and then cut that line of text. It doesn't care where the start point is on each individual character, unless it's over a certain size. If it's a huge piece of text where each letter is 4 inches, or something like that, then it might look for where the start position is. But if it's a line of text that's, 6 to 10 inches long, it's going to go to the start point of the beginning of that text and then just cut until it has to move somewhere else and go do something else. I don't really pay attention to using the vector start point. About the only time I have ever used that is if, like, I'm carving circles, then I want it to go around and then just move out to the next circle and not jump from, say, over here to up there and then spend a lot of time rapid down to here to start. Using the vector start points may or may not be a good thing, because if you do use your vector start points, you have to make sure your vector start points are all somewhere convenient so the machine doesn't have to hopscotch all over the place. So it adds a layer of complexity that I just don't think is necessary. And I've not really found a situation where I needed to use that vector start points. So let's see. Marvin May says, I use Sapili and use tung oil to finish an outdoor sign. Looks great after a year and a half. And you're absolutely right. Just know that it's going to need some maintenance to stay looking good like that. I'm not saying it can't be done. I mean, Chris Craft made a name for themselves by building mahogany hull boats for decades, but it wasn't a one-time deal. They have to be taken out of the water and maintained. That's all. So I'm not saying it can't be done. All I'm saying is it's not a one-time shot. So, hey, RB Woodwork comes in. Multicraft Plastics in Eugene has HDU sign material. Thank you for that. I did not know that. And in fact, every time I have looked up any kind of an HDU or something like that in Eugene, Oregon, I could not find it. I'll drive to Eugene, because that's not too far away. Okay. T Button says, I'm more concerned with quality of cut versus time spent. Clean as possible. I understand that, and I agree with it 100%. However, time has to be a part of the fact, has to be a factor in the calculation. Now, if you're a home hobbyist like me and you're making stuff for your own use, your time is your time. And time spent in the shop is valuable. I know, I get it. and you want the best quality you can get. But again, there comes a point to where you get into overkill. And like I said, is it really necessary to use a 10-yard dump truck to haul 3 sheets of plywood? I would argue that it isn't. It's just not necessary. If you're talking about modeling resolution, again, that maximum resolution is just not necessary. All it's going to do is use up resources on your computer, and you're not going to notice a difference in quality. That's the point. It's just, you're not going to notice the difference. So, but again, if you are talking about something like a V carving, and you are, wondering about the vector start points, what I have found is the number one thing I have done to my V carving to make it cleaner, nicer, and better quality is run the toolpath twice. Meaning I will run it, I hit cycle start in Mach 3, it goes over and it cuts the V carve. It finishes, lifts up, comes back over to the start position. I walk over to Mach 3 and I run it a second time. Just click cycle start again and let it run that entire toolpath again. I'm a home hobbyist. I'm not into production. My time is my time, and I can take as long as I need to. But that will go back and go through that entire project again, and you would be amazed at the amount of material that will be removed on that second pass. Now, I'll bump up the feed rate in Mach 3 on the fly so that it's moving faster because it's not hogging out a bunch of material. But that does more to go back and clean up a V carve than anything else that any other single step that I've ever done. So, and yes, that's a good point there, Brooks Martin. Doesn't Vectric say that 2D and 2.5D carves do not look at the modeling resolution? Exactly. That is only for 3D modeling. If you're doing V carves or drilling or pockets or anything, modeling resolution doesn't enter into the equation. It's not even looked at. So, I mean, you can set the modeling resolution to whatever you'd like. The only thing you will lose is the amount of time it took to change it, because the software doesn't care. So, Marvin Mays says, what about using automotive clear on an outdoor sign? I'm going to try it and let you all know what I come up with. Okay, that's fine. In fact, I thought of that a couple years back, and I looked into it. I found a couple of videos, but I couldn't tell you where because it's been a couple years ago. I found a couple of videos, and I found a couple of forum posts where people did try that, and every one of them advises against it, but I can't remember why. It's something about expansion and contraction rates of the wood. I really don't remember it, because automotive paints are not made to expand and contract. They don't have the elastomers in there. But then again, there was something else involved, because my question becomes, okay, what about the flexible paints used on plastic parts? There was some reason why the two were not compatible. I would do a little bit of looking for it. So, Rick French, there's been a big discussion in one of the Facebook pages about which V-bits are the best. Care to tell us what you use? I have no brand loyalty. And I'm going to give you an answer you don't want to hear, Rick. The best V-bit is the one that does the job you need it to do, the way you want it done, and that you can afford. I have Whiteside V-bits. I have Bosch V-bits I bought at my local big box store. I have one Amana V-bit. I have CMT V-bits. And I would challenge anybody to tell me the difference in cut or cut quality on any of them. If you get it dialed in to the project. And what I mean by that is you get your feed rate and RPMs correct for the material you're cutting, and your bit is sharp. That makes more difference than any brand ever could. There are some folks who swear by those expensive Amana V bits with um, with the replaceable carbide blades. I don't own one. I can't bring myself to pay that much for something like that I might use on occasion. I'm just fine with the CMT and Bosch V bits that I've been using, and the white side bits that you know, that I've been using for the last 5, 6, 7 years now. So, whoops. Where'd I go? What do you want? Jeff says auto clear is great for PVC or HDU. Sign shop. Usually use one shot enamel on wood after 2 prime coats. Even then, life expectancy is only a few years. Yeah, it was more to do with the compatibility of the automotive clear coat on wood, a stained finished piece of wood, something like that. So. Yeah, don't get me wrong. The Amana bits are good, but I'm not loyal to that brand. And I just can't bring myself, I cannot bring myself to pay that much for a bit that I can get somewhere cheaper. That's all. So, okay. I think this is going to be it. Aren't we required to at least have one of each brand? I think it's unspoken CNC law that, yeah, you got to try different brands. I've got El Cheapos that I bought off of eBay. I've got rather pricey bits that I bought off of uh, Tools Today on the deluxe brands. And I'll be honest, I can't tell the difference between them. And I've tried. I really have tried. So, what can I say? Very last question, then we're going to wrap this up and get out of here. Carlos Stain says, probably off topic for the day, but what software do you use to design 3D items to cut? Vectric Aspire. Exclusively. Now, other people use other things. I've seen people use Blender. I've seen people use ZBrush. I've seen people use Rhino, Fusion 360. I mean, you name it. I use Vectric Aspire, but I don't do as much 3D modeling as I thought I would do. I do a lot of 3D composite modeling where I'm combining various components into one big project. But other than that, I just don't do a whole heck of a lot. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. And as usual, I am going to talk a little bit about my friend Jerry over at his YouTube channel, Living Beyond Disability. He is holding his first challenge of the channel's history, and that is the 2021 Fairy House Challenge. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, basically he wants you to build a fairy house or a gnome house and keep it sized under 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches. Imagine a cube, 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, or 305 millimeters by 305 millimeters by 305 millimeters. Fairy house must fit within that cube. That's one stipulation of the rules. Okay? Can be made out of any material. You can use any process you want. You can use foam. You can use wood. You can use steel. You can weld it. You can cut it out with a plasma cutter. You can make it out of cardboard, whatever. Wood, foam, you name it. Get him the pictures before December 17th to be eligible for the prizes. And we're talking about some pretty good prizes here. 112-piece tool set, I mean, a rotary tool with flex shaft. I mean, we're not going El Cheapo here. Um, get them to him. There is a link to the page on this Fairy House Challenge down in the description of this video. Again, you have until December 17th to get it finished and get him pictures, video, whatever you take of it. So, again, link down in the description. Check out the rules and enter. Please do. There will be a live stream next weekend. I'm not sure what the topic is going to be. And oh, yeah, okay. Rick French is asking. It is December 10th is when my next dental appointment is. And so there will be live streams, live Q&As up until then. I don't know what next topic is going to be next week. So you'll just have to be surprised, same as I am. And if I did not get to your question, please put it in the comments of this and I'll get to it as quick as I can. I think that's about everything. We have to go grocery shopping after this. Michael does not have a video this afternoon. I am not going to know what to do with myself. So maybe I'll get this puppy trammed and get some work done. We'll see. Don't know. We'll check it out. Have a great Sunday, y'all. Thank you to everyone for the super chats and the super stickers. Thank you to everyone for clicking those donation buttons down in the description box of my videos. And until next week, y'all take care. Thank you. Have fun. Go make some chips. Bye.